Cabela's Big Game Hunter 2005 Adventures. This would mark the first time I've ever played one of those Cabela hunting games. I'd say this was a good start because it demonstrated what the series is about. It's a mostly realistic simulation of hunting out in the wilderness. You can buy weapons, outfittery, deer calls, rent ATVs to get around faster, etc. You can only run on foot for so long until you run out of breath. Could do without that feature, but hey, that's where the ATV comes in. Once you get out into the field, keep a keen eye out for wildlife, and hunt what you've got a license for. A rather immersive game that I found myself enjoying quite a bit. If anything, the movement controls are a bit strange. Pulling left, right, and back on the analog stick has the character move very slowly like. I feel like certain things, be they realistic or not, have no place in a video game, movement speeds being one of those things. Cabela's Dangerous Hunts 2. Again, this isn't a series I'm familiar with. Imagine my shock when I found out this game was a story-driven, largely linear adventure. Starts off with an introduction from your neighbor Stinky Pete. Turns out people have gone missing out in the lodge, some being a part of Pete's family. His name isn't actually Pete, but whatever. They really took to giving this guy some animation. I mean, damn, that's the most animated old guy I've ever seen. Sure got a lot of energy for his age. The game seems alright, even with the nauseating FOV. One thing I definitely didn't care for were the bear traps scattered around the place. You have to do your best to avoid them despite they completely blend into the environment. I mean, I guess that's the point of the thing, but why is it in this game? To prevent you from progressing quickly, I guess? I don't know. Regardless, not bad. And the story did keep me wanting to play, but I've got more to look at. Cabela's Outdoor Adventures. What a step backwards. So again, we got another realistic game, and I was excited to start this one up. But it feels like everything was downgraded this time around. Animal movements and reactions are unrealistic. There seems to be no distinction of whether an animal is legal to shoot or not. The draw distance is very limited. And worst of all, you have even less stamina than the last one. Hence, you get too tired to sprint very often. I don't think there's an ATV to be renting this time around, not from what I could locate. You know what's worse though? When you run out of sprint, this is how slow you walk. Good freaking luck finding the next animal. I get that for the most part this is a problem with the snow levels, but this is the second level after the first one. You don't even have a choice, you have to play the snow level next. Oh, how I did not like this. Call of Duty Finest Hour. I've played this one before. I'm still not sure if it's per se the first Call of Duty game, but at least it's the first one to make it to console. I've played the original PC game. Finest Hour plays the same, but I think the levels are somewhat different. Anyways, back in the mid-2000s, Call of Duty was among the highest quality World War shooters, battling against Medal of Honor for top quality. One of those two facts has changed since then. Can you guess which one? Now, I love World War shooters. Call of Duty 5 is one of my favorite shooters ever. Alas, Finest Hour feels underwhelming compared with what's to come in the series. It's one of the greats for its time, but the formula was yet to reach its peak. In short, the game is enjoyable, but is it worth revisiting? I'll leave that up to you. Call of Duty 2 Big Red One. Big Red One is a big step up from Finest Hour. Many say this is where Call of Duty really started to shine, and hey, for your second entry, I'd say that's a pretty radical accomplishment. Like with Finest Hour, it's similar to the PC counterpart, but I believe the levels are different? Not too sure this time. Never played the second one on PC. Nonetheless, the story, non-stop action, scripted set pieces, and shooting mechanics are tenfold from the previous game. In many ways, you can see how this is a still devolved form of the more recent Call of Duty games. The roots are clear, and as such, Big Red One makes for an engaging, well-rounded World War shooter that I had a pretty good time with in the mid-2000s on my Xbox. Capcom vs SNK 2 As many know by now, I'm no good at fighters. I can still try to enjoy them though, and I can tell Capcom vs SNK 2 is a quality experience. Kinda refreshing to see a 2D sprite-based fighter at this time, since a lot were going for that 3D edge, most of which from then not holding up very well. I enjoyed the little I played of this even if it did seem like the second opponent was overpowered. The dude has a giant steel ball, how is that legal game? Carmen Sandiego, The Secret of the Stolen Drums. Carmen Sandiego is wanted, of course, and rookie Cole wants to catch her by himself. To do so, he'll find himself climbing rooftops, unlocking gates, taking down a robot servants, all the while using some wacky skills of his to pull it all off. In particular, the kid makes great use of his pole as both a weapon and a means to navigate the environment. Ultimately, it's a platformer first and foremost, with beat-em-up moments against the most oblivious robots a video game has ever seen. It was fun, and that's where it matters. I looked at a video of the game online to see if it gets any better, and by the looks of it, the thing stays the same with pretty much identical music throughout the game. Seems rocky to me. Up in arms whether this is a good verdict or not. Cars. It's another licensed Disney adventure. These usually aren't too bad. No exception here.
Lightning.
You take on the role of Lightning McQueen, accomplishing tasks for the residents of Radiator Springs, while also having a little fun of your own. It's a kind of sequel adventure that's taking place after the events of the first film. You won't be playing this one for the story though. It's on par with any random episode of a kid's cartoon. The approach the game takes reminds me a lot of Toy Story 3's Sandbox mode, if you're familiar with that. Lots of fun if you're looking for an open-world racing game with personality. Casper, Spirit Dimensions. Some ghostly brute wants to take over the dimensions of both the living and dead. He has managed to capture every ghost so far except for Casper, somehow. I guess he was sleeping? Why would he be the only one left? Oh, okay, probably because nobody wants to be within a mile's radius of that! Casper, more like Creeper. The mouth syncing of this game is really, really bad. The mouths just move up and down without any sort of relation to what's being said.
This little ghost? I don't think so.
Not super important to mention here, but I found that extremely noticeable. The game seems to be a collectathon. You float around multiple different environments in search of various things that nearby characters require. This gives you items you need to progress. Seems like a pretty fine game, but I really do hate how there's this sort of spirit meter. You're a ghost. Do ghosts need stamina? I wouldn't think so. But yeah, given this is a part of the game, you're gonna be moving really slow, unless you stay still for a couple seconds and then you can move fast again for a short time. My gosh, why? The only people who are gonna complete this quickly are speedrunners. Anyways, despite the rushed feel, it is still kinda charming. I could see myself playing it more to see what's left on offer. Catwoman. If you've seen the movie, you know nothing good can come from this licensed character.
You wanna play my game?
See, even Catwoman herself is doubtful. So you start off with some pretty basic shenanigans.
Kick?
Exit the building slowly, hands in the air. You got 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3.
Okay, generally you want to wait the 5 seconds before you start shooting. None of this stops Catwoman from slowly appreciating this fine piece of art here. What follows is Catwoman climbing some buildings and really scary child noises. The physics are really strange. Controlling Catwoman is a chore, as she seems to just flop all over the place when you want her to go somewhere specific. Yeah, much like the film, this is not good. Cel Damage. Drive around way too fast and blow up everything in sight. That's the name of the game if Cel Damage wasn't. It's a cel-shaded, cartoony, twisted metal sort of game that's extremely fast-paced and very quirky. There are multiple modes to enjoy, all focused on the same kind of thing really. Brutally destroying the opposition with things like giant axes, lawnmower attachments, chainsaws, and the likes. What you see is what you get. A chaotic multiplayer or single-player experience that's fun to play for a round or two. I wouldn't say this is the kind of thing that you'd sit down and play for hours, but in small doses you can't really go wrong with Cel Damage. Chaos Field. Honestly, I didn't even know there was a shmup for GameCube beyond Ikaruga, so this is one of those boss rush types where you get a big ship in front of you, little ship to control, and a whole lot of bullets to avoid. You've got this awesome laser shield sword that you can deploy at any time to get rid of the bullets, but you remain vulnerable in between swings. Besides that, it's pretty much exactly as you'd expect. A fun game for fans of the genre, no doubt. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This game's something. As you could guess, it's based off the movie of the same name, the movie being the strange mid-2000s remake with Johnny Depp. Starts off with the super lanky Charlie chasing down a $10 bill he finds on the street. It happens to be sentient, because that thing is striking moves no inanimate object could. This goes on way longer than it should. The next level starts with you inside the factory trying to set free that guy that got stuck in the chocolate tube. Now look, I don't mean to be the guy to point this out, but honestly, don't you find it a little uncomforting to know that all of Wonka's Oompa Loompa slaves are... yeah... Charlie's Angels. So I just found out the guys behind this are responsible for Cocoto. And what do you Coco know? We'll get to that in this same video. I'd apologize for the pun, but we got more pressing matters at the moment. We're playing Charlie's Angels for the Nintendo GameCube. One of the most infamously worst video games ever made. So, in the game, famous monuments are being stolen somehow. Seriously, how do you steal some of the heaviest things known to man? Anyways, they just stole Lady Liberty, and I guess now they've had enough. Yeah, forget the fact that other monuments have been stolen, don't have camera security on one of the most obvious next targets. Now Charlie's Angels are going undercover in a beach model bikini showdown or something. The animations are terrible. The voices are entirely non-convincing. The gameplay only requires you kick or punch the opposition, then move to some area and flick a switch. That's the whole game. There's really nothing of value here. Chibi-Robo. I thought for a second, hey, perfect, let's transition from lowest quality games to highest quality games. But then I saw the dad's toes and oh my god. I think I'm gonna barf. So, it's Jenny's birthday, who is the little Kero King right here. Dad bought her an expensive Chibi-Robo, a little cleaning up robot that seems to do just about everything else, like giving gifts and stuff. What's the game actually about? Well, let me tell you, it takes some time to actually get there. What I gather is you perform various tasks around the home to please your masters. This involves some creative platforming and funny gimmicks. I imagine this changes in time, but at least for the first while, you need to constantly recharge yourself, because the power consumption is high and your battery storage is low. I'd probably love this game, but it seems like it'd take some adjusting to get used to with its strange gameplay mechanics and rather tedious back and forth. Chicken Little. Unlike Disney's other adventures in this list, Chicken Little directly follows the events of the movie. Of course, there's further expansion, since you're turning an hour-something long movie into a 3-hour game. But yeah, it's this sort of game where one stage is a semi-linear platforming scenario, the other is a runner. Then on occasion becomes a collectathon to spin things up a little. Seems like the kind of experience you'd say fits in between average and good. Nothing special, nothing bad, just kinda there. The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Traveler's Tales back at it again with yet another LEGO approach? Something about this interpretation seems far less appropriate though. Amidst a war, your city is under attack, so you're tasked with finding and saving your family in this quickly deteriorating house with smoke and flames everywhere. But don't forget to explore, find the secret bonus items, and collect some coins while you're at it. Traveler's Tales, no, this is not okay! If you ever wanted to play one of those LEGO games with a more realistic presentation, then I guess this one's for you. Has cooperative gameplay as well. Focuses on the plot of Narnia, as I'm sure you expected. It's not a bad game, I actually thought it was kind of fun, but what on earth were they doing taking the LEGO approach? Yeah, I know around this same time those same games started coming to fruition in the first place, but yeesh, who expected a game like this to be a collectathon?
Leave me alone. We need to find her before—
Find her? She's right there! Just turn the corner and— aw, geez, see, you waited too long with your needless exposition. Oh well, at least you can steal some coins from the property owners. City Racer. When I first saw this, I thought, yeah, okay, there's no way this isn't gonna be the world's most generic racer. And, well, gee, I don't know what to say. It's like you got the world's most generic racer in development, but at some point someone said, hey, this is the world's most generic racer. We gotta add Mario Kart powers. Look, I think that idea itself is fine. You got Blur, hey, I'm down. But this, it's just so by the books, but also has Mario Kart powers. Not to mention the handling is just really weird and the cars are like soapboxes. They flip and flop like they weigh nothing. Hey, at least we got some Rayman 3 representation in here. I love being reminded of good games and bad games to make me feel like I've made all the wrong choices. Cocoto Funfair. Hey, it's the Charlie's Angels devs back at it again with Cocoto. I don't know anything about this character, but apparently nobody else does either. All I know is this guy became a sort of mascot for their company, but that's about it. So this is a cross-platform game with the Wii, on that platform being called Cocoto Magic Circus. What's the point of that name change? I get Sly Cooper being called Sly Raccoon because Cooper means butts, but who's gonna get offended by the word funfair? Why even argue? It's a light gun shooter on the GameCube. You know, the system without a light gun. Real quality decision there to bring this to the Cube. Get this, it also came out for the PlayStation 2, but it's incompatible with the GunCon. No, instead it came with this weird Cocoto peripheral light gun that you needed to play the game properly. What a joke. Cocoto Kart Racer. Yeah, I mean, I guess this could have been a lot worse. A lot of these whipped up kart racer games are terrible to control, and hey, I mean, this one sorta works. Minus the fact that this happened at one point. Speedrunners take notice. I just discovered the latest trick. But yeah, it's just a Mario Kart clone. What do you expect? Nothing really to talk about here. You could do a lot worse, but of course with such a thing said, you could also do a lot better. Cocoto Platform Jumper. What is this name? Seriously, you could have picked any name for this game. I mean, you don't even need to see the game, and no platform jumper is the most generic name you could ever come up with. You start the game and... wait a minute, what's this? An actual story for our little Cocoto friend? Now this I gotta see. Okay, so Cocoto is one of 4 little devils who have secret magical powers, but the god of lightning Zeron wanted their powers, so he tries to kidnap them but isn't able to capture Cocoto. So now, Cocoto has to rescue his friends. Well dang, official Cocoto lore, I can dig it. Generic, but at least they did something. They gave him cutscenes and a voice. Any of that minimal effort is lost as soon as you get into this Rainbow Islands clone, though. Nowhere near as fun as that game because the environments are just so boring and the gameplay barely works. You got multiple attacks, but your fire arc is the only one that's really effective. I could say a lot about this game, but I'm not going to because I just don't care enough. Fun trivia, eventually they asset swapped this game into something called Heracle's Battle with the Gods. Thanks to Val4XD for telling me about that. Codename Kids Next Door Operation Video Game. Never watched this show. The game seems alright. It's a platformer with some third-person shooting elements to it. It's also a bit of a collectathon. I guess you can kinda compare this to Ratchet & Clank, an extremely underwhelming Ratchet & Clank no doubt, without the focus on cool weapons. Nothing Kids Next Door does is particularly terrible or particularly good, so I guess the best you can say about it is that it'd be a fun distraction for fans of the show. It's not too bad for someone unfamiliar with it either, it's okay. I could play through this and not hate myself for it, you know? Conan. Conan was a man, and his name was Conan. He did brave things, because he was Conan. Conan did what Conan could, because horse, and mountains, and Conan. If you can't tell, this is one of those epic Lord of the Rings types where you got an engaging story with heroic heroics. Dire stakes, poverty, fortune, famine. This story pulls all of the strings. And honestly, it seems like it'd be a pretty good game, genuinely. The plot is interesting, and I did want to keep going. But I must admit, the presentation can feel at times unintentionally overly bold. Like, I started laughing pretty hard when the narrator said, "Nothing would stop Conan unless his horse cannot go any further, but even then Conan would continue on foot." Like, nothing even happened to the horse. Why would you say that? What was the point? Then immediately after Conan's horse falls off a cliff, Conan doesn't even have a second thought about it, so why even make a big show of the horse in the first place? If you like big story-driven hack-and-slash adventures with big brutes and terrifying consequences, then Conan might be the game for you. Conflict Desert Storm, the first game in a long-forgotten series. So, Conflict started out as pretty much a SOCOM clone in a different setting. Baghdad, I think, if the second game's title's anything to go by. What do you do in Conflict? You complete missions. Sometimes pretty long missions. Go do a thing, then go do another thing, and another thing. I know I'm really simplifying it, but hey, it's a nutshell analogy. This game has some fans, and I guess I can kind of understand the appeal, but even at the time, there were other games that did this far better, in my opinion. In fact, the sequel itself is a perfect example to go by, so hey, good for them. Nonetheless, it's still kind of fun at times. There's just nothing it does particularly well, and honestly, what you see is what you get. Maybe if I was really bored and had nothing else to do. Conflict Desert Storm 2, Back to Baghdad. If you're gonna do a sequel, you might as well go all out, and they did for this one. The presentation all around is greatly improved. The squads feel far more lively, you're given far more inventory to use at any point in time. Even in the dull moments, there's still always something going on, like giant helicopters flying overhead. Not just that one warthog over and over from the last one. The environments are far richer as well, with more detailed textures on various surfaces. I didn't say this yet, but both this and the prequel have this really weird control mechanic. The crosshair doesn't seem to sit in one place, instead just kinda jitters around the environment, and might auto-target an enemy but shortly after detarget. I didn't think this wonky system was as vital the first time around because there was a lot less combat and more of an emphasis on sneaking around. This one seems to have more combat and less sneaking. In that case, maybe the original will be better for some players. Suppose it's a matter of preference. I still think some fine-tuning was needed, but I would say that indeed this game's presentation surpasses the original. Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex. In what was the original Crash 4, beloved mascot Crash Bandicoot visits multiple zany worlds once again in an effort to stop Neo Cortex from taking control over planet Earth. There's actually a lot more going on than simply that, but as I think you'd find, it's all a bit confusing and all over the place. As too is this game to many, including myself. It's a rather objective opinion, really. Instead of giving you more of the familiar fan-favorite linear platforming stages, Crash will find himself in many unusual situations. Driving a plane to take down floating engines, riding a kinetic ball through a maze. At least there are still platforming stages, they just seem to be at an equal priority to the strange driving-focused stages that overall make the game feel like a mess. A somewhat enjoyable mess, but it unfortunately doesn't stop there. Rather, Cortex has strange bugs, weird level design, and an overall feeling of repetitivity. The things the game tries in order to shake things up are controversial at best, and as such, it's a Crash game that most prefer to leave in the past. Crash Nitro Kart. With the success of Crash Team Racing, I guess a sequel was inevitable. Not sure why it needed some big dumb story. That seems to have been a thing with Crash Bandicoot games at this time. It's like they didn't know what kind of games to make, so relied on a story to carry it. Not as relevant in a kart racing game, I wouldn't think. Actually, I'd greatly prefer if the story just wasn't there at all. Let's just race and have fun. Thankfully, what I played seemed to be more in tune with just letting the players enjoy a game of Mario Kart clonage. For this generation, I'd say it's one of the more acute Mario Kart clones, in that it feels close enough to the original, but also has its own identity. My biggest issue with this one is the camera. I feel like I'm seeing too much of the vehicle in the character's head. The perspective would be better if raised a little bit, but maybe that's just my opinion. Crash Tag Team Racing. A defining example of sensory overload in the form of a video game. What doesn't this game try to do? It's everything just short of a first-person shooter. Oh no! So yeah, I don't know where to start with this one. What should be a racing game is actually an open-world collectathon with the occasional racing. The hub world has a focus on retrieving items for people like keys and whatnot. I'm honestly not sure what any of this is for. Just to get some coins to spend on stuff like outfits, perhaps? I had this when I was younger and I recall feeling the same. There's just so much going on that I get overwhelmed and want to play something else instead with more of a focus. Crazy Taxi. Speaking of when I was younger, this is one of those games my dad played at the arcades a lot and I'd just sit and watch. Why? Because I was no good at them, and that remains the same today. I still can't understand how you'd play this game and not get a D license. But as the game says, it's party time, let's have some fun. Can't deny this fast-paced driving mayhem is very exciting. What you do is drive around a cityscape looking for passengers, stop by someone to pick them up and take them to their destination, rinse and repeat. How you get there is entirely up to you. Blast through a park destroying all that surrounds it, or just take the road plain and simple. It's all time-based though, so you'd be best driving as chaotic as can be. No laws to break here. It's bright, vibrant, and exhilarating. This console port of the arcade classic also has some new modes like Big Jump, Drive to the Flag. These kinda suck, but the extra time trial modes for the arcade game are a lot of fun. Cubivore Survival of the Fittest. This game confuses me. It starts off with a cutscene that seems to imply it's against the creatures of the land dominating those beneath it, but then you're immediately instructed to do exactly that as the game begins. What? Your goal, as the game tells you, is to bring wilderness back and help the many species thrive once again. So what do? You eat all the remaining wilderness because it helps you grow. The game's plot seems so contradictory to itself. Is that intentional? Is this game some kind of a weird statement? Like, honestly, I'm kind of freaking out. I have no idea what's going on. Nonetheless, you start as this little pig feller and grow into the food chain. No, literally, the more and more you eat, the more you evolve, and become a better, more self-sustaining life form. You see the minimap on the top right? Well, all you have to do really is make it from point A to point B, although sometimes point B is obstructed by empty white nothingness that'll open once you eat a certain amount of something or a certain creature. So these are kind of mini arenas, where the correct evolution will let you go forth to the next stage. Eventually you'll come across much more dangerous enemies, and even get to mate and make babies. This game has to be some kind of political commentary, no? Like, if not, I just don't get it. Yeah, I'm sure I'm taking this way too seriously or something, but when you're left to such a confusion, you kinda have to come up with your own hypothesis. The game is fun, I guess, but the cutscenes take way too long, at least for the start of the game. It seems like each time you eat something, you'll get 10 seconds of cutscenes. How often do you eat something in the game? I don't know, at least once a minute. As you could guess, this start and pause gameplay can be pretty obnoxious. Less of that as the game goes on, at least. I'm not really sure what to make of this game. It's by all means abstract and pretty interesting. I'd probably give it a longer play session if I was playing on my own, but I don't know if I'd really say this is good per se. Cubix, Robots for Everyone, Showdown. Another game made by the V.I.D.E.O.G.A.M.E, and you know, it just makes me wonder sometimes, were these the games in development for the V.I.D.E.O.M.E 2 console before it got canned? Man, just imagine if this was the best the M2 could do when the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2 were on their way. The mouth sync is so bad, they're just puppets! Anyways, this game played slow like in the emulator, so I turned to genuine hardware. Supposedly this is based on a television show of the same name. So what is this game? Well, it's a kind of 3D Pokemon clone, I guess. Travel around the city, complete mini objectives, but of course the primary focus is the fighting. Instead of Pokemon, you'll have giant robots. Instead of choosing power moves, you'll get a roulette wheel that you'll have to stop on point to engage a successful hit. Not as easy as it looks. Unfortunately, I'd have to say the whole experience felt very bland and uninspired. Clearly a clone of something far superior to it. Kids might be able to have some fun with its simplicity and vivid designs, but ultimately it all just felt really cheap to me. Not something I'd really want to keep playing. Curious George. The yellow hat guy is trying to locate a mysterious artifact for his employer. Turns out it was much smaller than he anticipated. Upset, he thinks of ways to please his boss after his unfortunate discovery. While he makes his way back to town, Curious George follows curiously. It's an incredibly linear adventure game that follows the events of the animated film of the same name. It's another one of those games where it's like, gee, I don't even know what to say about it. It's just you going through the notions, really. Occasionally it does something else, like forcing you to do this quick-time dancing minigame, and oh geez, this is awful. The linear platforming moments themselves, though, aren't terrible, but honestly, I don't think it's enough to really sell you on the game. Even at its best, the game is very run-of-the-mill, unexciting, and not really worth looking into. It was clearly designed for the youngest of the young gamers, so it's hard to fault it, but it's also hard to find much good to say about it. Custom-Robo. It's gonna be hard to separate this from that Cubix game from a minute ago. They're pretty much identical in what they tried to do, but I will say that Custom-Robo is a far, far superior experience overall. The story is, if even mildly interesting, so that's already a step above Cubix. The goal of the game, besides the RPG elements that seem mostly plot-oriented, is to battle giant robots. Unlike the previously mentioned game, you're thrown into a virtual battle arena where you and another will duke it out against each other using energy-based weaponry. Geez, the last couple games that are coming up here, I'm having a hard time explaining. But I don't know, this one is just kind of like that Game Boy Advance game Sonic Battle, I guess? There doesn't appear to be an actual physical covering system, so it's kind of just an all-out shooting fest in this abstract virtual environment. You got some special moves and techniques at your disposal, and that's sure to make the battles more enticing. Custom-Robo is actually rather fun. I just can't think of the right comparisons in mind. I don't often come across games like this. Even though I know it's not entirely unique, I've seen a lot of games like this. But my unfamiliarity of it is pretty akin to it just not being my type of game, but hey, if it looks like something you'd enjoy, then it probably is. So I can't see a reason not to give her a whirl.